"You're fired," the store manager said, his face flushed with anger. "Hand in your name tag and clear out your locker." Sarah stood frozen. "But I was just trying to help him," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. The manager shook his head, unmoved. "Company policy is clear. You gave away merchandise worth $149.99 without authorization. That's theft, Sarah. I should be calling the police, not just firing you." Sarah placed her name tag on the desk, the small piece of plastic that had represented her pride for the last 3 years. 3 years of never being late. 3 years of perfect customer satisfaction scores. 3 years of picking up extra shifts when nobody else would. All gone because she couldn't watch an elderly man with a walker struggle to reach his bus in the pouring rain. "Please," she tried one last time. "Mr. Peterson is a regular customer. He comes in every week. His grandson was in the hospital and he needed to get there quickly. The store umbrella was the only one we had left." The manager's face hardened. "Rules are rules. We sell umbrellas, we don't give them away. Now leave before I change my mind about the police." She walked out of the office with her head down, avoiding eye contact with her coworkers. News traveled fast in Parker's department store. Everyone would know by the end of the day. Single mom of 2 fired for stealing. How would she pay her rent now? How would she feed Emma and Liam? As Sarah pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot, the rain had stopped, leaving behind that unique smell of wet pavement and fresh air. She looked up at the sky, a patch of blue appearing between retreating gray clouds. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? It had started as a normal Tuesday morning. Sarah's alarm blared at 5:15 a.m., and she silenced it quickly to avoid waking 6-year-old Emma and 8-year-old Liam, who were still peacefully sleeping in the room next door. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms in a building that had seen better days, but Sarah had worked hard to make it feel like home. She slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker before hopping into the shower. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance. Shower, wake the kids, make breakfast, pack lunches, drop the children at Mrs. Garcia's apartment downstairs for before-school care, and catch the 6:45 a.m. bus to make it to Parker's department store by 7:30. "Mom," Liam took the last of the cereal. Emma's voice carried from the kitchen as Sarah was getting dressed. "Did not. There was barely any left anyway," Liam shot back. Sarah sighed, pulling her hair into a neat ponytail. "There's oatmeal in the cabinet," she called out, "and we'll get cereal on the weekend." After breakfast, lunch making, and the inevitable search for Emma's missing shoe, found under the couch, Sarah hustled the kids downstairs to Mrs. Garcia's apartment. The elderly woman greeted them with a warm smile, the smell of cinnamon wafting from her kitchen. "You look tired, mihija," Mrs. Garcia said, smoothing Emma's hair as the little girl rushed past to play with Mrs. Garcia's cat. "Just the usual morning chaos," Sarah smiled, checking her watch. "Thank you again for watching them. I'll be back at my normal time tonight." Mrs. Garcia waved away her thanks. "These children are sunshine. Now go before you miss your bus." Sarah jogged to the bus stop, arriving just as the number 42 pulled up. She settled into a seat, checking her reflection in her phone's camera. Her Parker's department store uniform, black pants and a blue button-up shirt, looked neat and professional. 3 years at the store had taught her that appearances mattered to management. The bus wound through the gradually awakening city. Sarah watched raindrops race down the window, merging and separating in unpredictable patterns. The weather report had warned of a storm system moving in, and the sky was already darkening with heavy clouds. By the time she arrived at Parker's, the first few raindrops were falling. She rushed inside, clocked in, and headed to the morning staff meeting. "Morning, Sarah," called May, her closest friend at the store. May worked in women's clothing, while Sarah was assigned to the home goods department. Morning, Sarah replied, grabbing a paper cup and pouring coffee from the communal pot. Looks like it's going to be a wet one today. Tell me about it. The weather app says we're getting 3 inches of rain. May lowered her voice. Also, heads up, Jenkins is on the warpath about something. Store manager Richard Jenkins was notorious for his mood swings. Some days he was almost pleasant, complimenting staff on displays or customer interactions. Other days, like today apparently, he seemed determined to find fault with everything and everyone. Thanks for the warning, Sarah whispered as Jenkins entered the break room. Good morning, everyone, he announced without smiling. Before you head to your departments, I need to remind you all about loss prevention. Our numbers for the quarter are concerning. Remember, every item in this store represents profit for the company and income for all of us. His gaze swept across the staff, lingering momentarily on Sarah. She shifted uncomfortably. Discounts are only to be applied according to the published schedule. No exceptions, no matter how sad the customer's story might be. Is that clear? A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Good, now get to work. Sarah headed to Home Goods, turning on lights and straightening displays before the store opened at 8:00 a.m. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows and skylights. She glanced up, watching water stream across the glass. The store intercom chimed, announcing 5 minutes until opening. Sarah made one final scan of her department, ensuring everything was perfect. The umbrellas were prominently displayed near the front, anticipating increased demand due to the weather. The seasonal display of spring gardening items had been moved back slightly to make room. At exactly 8:00 a.m., the entrance doors unlocked with a click. Despite the rain, a handful of customers hurried in, shaking off water from coats and shoes. Sarah greeted each person who ventured into Home Goods with a smile. Welcome to Parker's. Can I help you find anything today? Most mornings passed in a blur of customer questions, restocking shelves and processing purchases. This Tuesday was particularly busy because of the storm. Umbrellas sold steadily throughout the morning, and by noon, they were down to the last few. During her lunch break, Sarah sat with May in the break room, both women eating quickly to maximize their brief 30 minutes of rest. How's your day going? May asked, unwrapping a sandwich. Busy. This rain is driving everyone to buy umbrellas and rain boots. Sarah took a bite of her salad. How are the kids doing at school? Emma's been talking about the science fair coming up. Liam's team won their math competition last week, Sarah said with pride. And Emma wants to grow crystals for her science project. We need to buy supplies this weekend. They're such good kids, May said. You're doing an amazing job with them, especially. She trailed off, but Sarah knew she meant especially as a single parent. After Mark had left 3 years ago, simply disappearing one day while Sarah was at work and the kids were at school, leaving only a note saying he needed space. Sarah had thrown herself into both parenting and her job. Parker's hadn't been her dream career, but it offered steady hours and health insurance for the kids. Thanks, Sarah said. Some days are harder than others. Their break ended too quickly, and Sarah returned to the sales floor. The afternoon crowd was thinner, the heavy rain deterring all but the most determined shoppers. Around 3:30 p.m., as Sarah was arranging a display of decorative pillows, she noticed Mr. Peterson enter the store. The elderly man was a regular customer who came in almost weekly, usually to buy small gifts for his grandchildren or household items. Today, he leaned heavily on his walker, his clothes already damp from the short walk from the parking lot to the entrance. Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson, Sarah greeted him warmly. Nasty weather we're having. Indeed it is, dear, he replied, his voice wavering slightly. I wouldn't be out in it, but my grandson James is in the hospital, appendicitis. They're keeping him overnight after surgery, and I promised I'd visit. I'm so sorry to hear that, Sarah said. Is there something I can help you find today? Actually, I'm looking for an umbrella. I took the bus here, and I'll need to take another one to get to Memorial Hospital. My old umbrella broke last week, and in this downpour. He gestured toward the windows, where rain was now coming down in sheets. Sarah led him to the umbrella display. We've been selling them quickly today, but we still have a few options. Mr. Peterson examined the remaining umbrellas, his gnarled hands carefully opening and closing one with a blue and white pattern. This one seems sturdy. How much is it? Sarah checked the price tag, $24.99. The elderly man's face fell slightly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet, counting bills carefully. I have exactly $23.17, he said with embarrassment in his voice. The bus fare took more than I expected. Perhaps I could come back tomorrow. Sarah looked out the window again. The rain was falling harder now, driven sideways by gusting wind. The thought of this gentle old man waiting at a bus stop in such conditions, then walking through the hospital parking lot to visit his grandson, made her heart ache. Let me check if we have any on sale, she said, though she knew they didn't. Mr. Peterson smiled gratefully. That's very kind of you, dear. Sarah walked to the back storage area, thinking quickly. She could cover the difference herself. It was less than $2. But Jenkins had been clear about discounts that morning, and she'd already received a warning last month for giving an unauthorized 10% discount to a college student buying supplies for her dorm room. As she returned to the sales floor, she noticed Mr. Peterson glancing anxiously at his watch. The next bus comes in 15 minutes, he explained. If I miss it, I'll have to wait another hour and visiting hours end at 7:00. Sarah made a split-second decision. Mr. Peterson, we have a store umbrella that employees use when helping customers to their cars. It's not for sale, but you're welcome to borrow it for your hospital visit. You can return it the next time you're shopping. His face brightened. Are you certain that's allowed? No, it absolutely wasn't allowed. Store property was never to leave the premises without proper authorization and documentation. But the relief in Mr. Peterson's eyes made the risk seem worth taking. It's fine, Sarah assured him, retrieving the large navy blue umbrella with Parker's department store printed on it from behind the counter. Consider it our way of sending good wishes to your grandson. You're an angel, Mr. Peterson said, accepting the umbrella gratefully. I'll bring it back first thing next week, I promise. Take your time, Sarah replied. Just focus on your grandson right now. She walked with him to the front entrance, opening the umbrella for him as they stepped outside under the store's awning. The bus stop is just there, he pointed with a trembling hand. Thank you again, dear. Your kindness means more than you know. Sarah watched as he made his way carefully across the parking lot, the large umbrella sheltering him from the worst of the storm. A warm feeling spread through her chest despite the chilly rain. This was why she worked in customer service, to help people, to make their days a little better, a little easier. She turned to go back inside and froze. Store manager Jenkins stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face thunderous. My office now, he said. With a sinking feeling, Sarah followed him through the store. Coworkers glanced up as they passed, curiosity and concern in their expressions. May caught her eye from women's clothing, mouthing, "What happened?" Sarah could only give a small shrug before continuing down the hallway to the administrative offices. Jenkins closed the door behind them and pointed to a chair across from his desk. Sit. Sarah perched on the edge of the seat, heart racing. Mr. Jenkins, I can explain. Explain what exactly? He interrupted. Explain how I just watched you give away store property worth $149.99 to a customer. $149.99, but it's just the store umbrella. We use it to help customers to their cars. That's not just a store umbrella. That's a premium Parker's branded umbrella, special ordered for VIP customer assistance only. It costs $149.99 wholesale, and it's company property, not yours to give away. Sarah's mouth went dry. She had no idea the umbrella was so expensive. It looked like an ordinary, if large, umbrella with the store logo. Mr. Peterson is a loyal customer, she tried to explain. He's elderly and needed to visit his grandson in the hospital. He was going to get soaked waiting for the bus. So you decided to steal from the company to help him. Jenkins's voice rose. Did you authorize this with anyone? Fill out a loaner form. Get a manager's approval. No, but... There are no buts here, Sarah. This is a clear violation of company policy. He promised to return it next week, Sarah said, her voice small. And if he doesn't, or if it breaks in the wind or gets left on the bus, then what? I'll pay for it myself if that happens, she offered desperately. Jenkins shook his head. Too late for that. This isn't the first time you've bent the rules, Sarah. Last month it was an unauthorized discount. Before that, you let a customer return an item outside the return window. Those were special circumstances. Every circumstance seems special to you. That's the problem. Rules exist for a reason. He pulled out a form from his desk drawer and began filling it out. I've given you chances, but this crosses the line. With growing horror, Sarah realized what form he was completing. Employee termination. Please, Mr. Jenkins, I need this job. I have 2 children to support. You should have thought of that before giving away company property. He continued writing. Parker's has a zero-tolerance policy for theft, and that's what this is, regardless of your intentions. It wasn't theft. It was a loan to a customer in need. Loans are authorized. This wasn't. He finished writing and pushed the paper across the desk. Sign here acknowledging your termination for cause. Sarah stared at the paper, her vision blurring. What about my record, my reference? Your termination will be recorded as for cause, specifically unauthorized removal of company property. As for references, I can confirm your dates of employment, nothing more. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. For cause meant no unemployment benefits while she looked for a new job. No positive reference meant finding that new job would be infinitely harder. Please, she whispered again, my kids. Jenkins's expression remained unmoved. The company has surveillance footage of you giving away the umbrella without authorization. This isn't debatable, Sarah. With a shaking hand, she signed the form, seeing no alternative. You're fired, the store manager said, his face flushed with anger. Hand in your name tag and clear out your locker. And now here she was, standing in the parking lot of a job she no longer had, wondering how she would tell her children that Mommy might not be able to buy groceries this week. The irony that the rain had stopped wasn't lost on her. Sarah walked to the bus stop, sitting heavily on the bench. She pulled out her phone, checking the time. 4:15 p.m. The kids wouldn't expect her home until after 6:00. She had almost 2 hours to figure out what to tell them, how to make this seem less catastrophic than it felt. She scrolled through her contacts, considering who might be able to help. Her parents lived 3 states away and were barely making ends meet themselves. Her friends were mostly other single parents in similar financial situations. Mark hadn't sent child support in months. As she sat contemplating her dire situation, a notification popped up on her phone. A news alert from the local station. Storm causes major flooding downtown. Roads closed. Sarah clicked on the link, reading about flooded streets and stranded motorists. The hospital where Mr. Peterson's grandson was staying was mentioned specifically, with reports of the surrounding streets being underwater. Despite everything, Sarah found herself hoping Mr. Peterson had made it safely. At least the umbrella would have kept him dry, the umbrella that had cost her job. Her phone rang, startling her. The screen displayed Parker's department store. For a moment, wild hope flared in her chest. Maybe Jenkins had reconsidered. Maybe someone had spoken up for her. "Hello," she answered. "Sarah, it's May. I heard what happened." Her friend's voice was low, as if she was trying not to be overheard. "It's completely unfair. Jenkins is being a jerk." "Did he say anything after I left?" Sarah asked. "He called a quick meeting to remind everyone about the property removal policy. He didn't name you specifically, but everyone knows." May paused. "Listen, I can't talk long, but I wanted to tell you that Corinne from HR said you should apply for unemployment anyway. Sometimes they approve it even with for-cause terminations if the circumstances warrant it." "Thanks for the tip," Sarah said, though she doubted it would help. "And thanks for calling. I'll check on you tonight, okay? Hang in there." After hanging up, Sarah continued to sit at the bus stop, watching cars splash through puddles. She should get home, start looking for jobs online immediately. But the enormity of her situation felt paralyzing. Finally, the bus arrived, and Sarah boarded mechanically, finding a seat near the back. As the bus pulled away from Parker's department store, she couldn't help looking back at the building where she'd worked for 3 years. The large, illuminated sign seemed to mock her. The ride home was a blur. Sarah's mind raced through calculations. How much was in her savings account, when bills were due, what expenses could be cut? The math was discouraging. Her savings would cover rent for 1 month, maybe 2 if they were extremely careful with other expenses. She got off at her stop and walked slowly to her apartment building. The sidewalks were slick with rain, reflecting the graying afternoon sky. Mrs. Garcia's door opened as Sarah passed. "You're home early," the older woman observed. Then her expression changed as she noticed Sarah's red eyes and dejected posture. "What's wrong, mihija?" "I lost my job today," Sarah admitted, her voice cracking. Mrs. Garcia pulled her into a warm hug. "Oh, my dear, come in, come in. The children are playing, they haven't noticed the time." Sarah followed her neighbor into the apartment, where Emma and Liam were absorbed in a board game on the living room floor. "Mom," Emma looked up with surprise, "you're early." "The store closed early because of the rain," Sarah lied, forcing a smile. She couldn't bear to tell them the truth yet. "Mrs. Garcia taught us to play Monopoly," Liam said excitedly. "I'm winning." "That's wonderful, buddy." Sarah turned to Mrs. Garcia. "Thank you for watching them. I should get them home for dinner." "Why don't you all stay and eat with me?" Mrs. Garcia offered. "I made a big pot of chicken soup this morning." The kindness nearly broke Sarah's composure. "That's very generous, but—" "No buts. You look like you need some time to think and the children are having fun. Stay." Unable to argue, Sarah nodded gratefully. "Thank you." While the children continued their game, Sarah helped Mrs. Garcia in the kitchen, mechanically cutting bread and setting the table. "Do you want to talk about it?" Mrs. Garcia asked quietly. Sarah explained what had happened with Mr. Peterson and the umbrella, her voice flat as she described Jenkins's reaction. "That man has a heart of stone," Mrs. Garcia declared when she finished. "You did the right thing, helping that poor old man." "Maybe, but now I can't help my own children." Sarah looked toward the living room, where Emma and Liam were laughing. "What am I going to do?" "You will find another job," Mrs. Garcia said firmly. "A better one with people who value kindness, and until then we will manage. Your children will not go hungry." "I can't ask you to help us more than you already do." "You didn't ask, I offered." Mrs. Garcia stirred the soup. "When my Antonio died 5 years ago, I thought my world had ended. But neighbors brought food, friends drove me to appointments, the community carried me until I could walk on my own again. This is how we live, helping each other through the hard times." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "I don't know how I'll repay you." "Someday you will help someone else who needs it, just as you helped that old man today." Mrs. Garcia patted her hand. Now, dry your eyes before the children see and worry." Dinner was a welcome distraction. The chicken soup was warm and comforting, and the children's chatter about their day at school filled the silence that might otherwise have been occupied by Sarah's worries. After dinner, Sarah thanked Mrs. Garcia again and took the children upstairs to their apartment. As they got ready for bed, she tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, listening to their prayers and reading a story as usual. Once the kids were asleep, Sarah sat at the small table in their kitchen, opening her laptop to search for jobs. She updated her resume, wrote a generic cover letter that could be modified for different positions, and began the soul-crushing process of scrolling through job listings. Nothing matched her experience exactly. Nothing paid as well as Parker's had. Nothing offered the same flexible schedule that allowed her to be there for her children. She applied for 5 positions before exhaustion overtook her. Tomorrow she would call the unemployment office, though Jenkins's, for cause, designation would likely disqualify her from benefits. As she was closing her laptop, an email notification appeared. The sender was Jasmine Williams, Executive Assistant to CEO. The subject line read, "Regarding today's incident at Parker's department store." Sarah's heart raced as she clicked to open it. "Dear Ms. Thompson asterisk. My name is Jasmine Williams, Executive Assistant to Mr. Alexander Parker, CEO of Parker's department stores. Mr. Parker would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. at the corporate headquarters regarding the incident that occurred today. Please confirm if this time works for you. Sincerely asterisk. Jasmine Williams, Executive Assistant to the CEO asterisk. Parker's department stores." Sarah read the email 3 times, trying to understand what it meant. Why would the CEO want to meet with her? To formally document her termination? To threaten legal action about the umbrella? To make an example of her to other employees? Whatever the reason, she had no choice but to go. With trembling fingers, she replied confirming the appointment. Sleep eluded her that night. She lay awake, scenarios playing through her mind, none of them good. By morning, she had dark circles under her eyes and a knot of dread in her stomach. Mrs. Garcia agreed to take the children to school, waving away Sarah's thanks. "Just tell me how the meeting goes," she said. Sarah dressed carefully in her best non-work clothes, a navy blue skirt, white blouse, and sensible flats. She caught the early bus downtown, arriving at Parker's corporate headquarters, a gleaming 12-story building, at 8:45 a.m. The security guard checked her ID, issued a visitor's badge, and directed her to the elevators. "Top floor, ma'am." The elevator ride to the 12th floor seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. The doors opened onto a reception area with plush carpet, modern furniture, and a sleek desk where a woman with impeccable hair and a crisp suit looked up. "Sarah Thompson?" the woman asked. Sarah nodded. "I'm Jasmine Williams. Mr. Parker is expecting you. Please follow me." Jasmine led her down a hallway lined with photos of Parker's department stores through the decades, starting with a black and white image of a small dry goods shop from 1932. They stopped at a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Jasmine knocked softly, then opened the door. "Ms. Thompson is here, Mr. Parker." "Thank you, Jasmine. Please send her in." Sarah entered the spacious office, immediately struck by the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Behind a large desk sat Alexander Parker, the third-generation CEO of Parker's department stores, a man whose picture hung in every store but whom few employees ever met in person. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed her as she approached. To her surprise, he wasn't alone. Seated in one of the guest chairs was an elderly man with a walker propped beside him, Mr. Peterson. "Ms. Thompson," Alexander Parker stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I believe you know Mr. Peterson." "Yes, of course," Sarah said, shaking the CEO's hand before turning to the elderly man. "Mr. Peterson, how is your grandson?" "James is doing well, thanks to you," Mr. Peterson smiled. "The doctors say he can go home today." "I'm glad to hear that," Sarah said sincerely, though confusion about the situation made it hard to focus. "Please sit down." Mr. Parker gestured to the empty chair beside Mr. Peterson. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here." "Yes, sir," Sarah admitted, perching nervously on the edge of the chair. "Mr. Peterson came to see me personally this morning," the CEO explained. "He was quite distressed when he learned that you had been terminated for helping him yesterday." Sarah glanced at Mr. Peterson, who nodded. "When I returned to the store this morning to give back the umbrella," the elderly man said, "that manager, Jenkins, was boasting to another employee about firing you." Mr. Peterson's voice shook with indignation. He seemed proud of it. "When I tried to explain the situation and offer to pay for the umbrella myself, he dismissed me." "That's when Mr. Peterson decided to see me directly," Mr. Parker continued. "Security was initially reluctant to let him up without an appointment, but he was quite persistent." Mr. Peterson chuckled. "I told them I'd sit in the lobby all day if necessary. I've had 3 hip replacements. Sitting is one thing I do very well." "Fortunately, I was available," Mr. Parker said, "and Mr. Peterson shared a story that concerned me greatly." He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Ms. Thompson, have you heard of the Parker's promise?" "Yes, sir," Sarah nodded. "It's framed in the break room of every store. At Parker's, we promise to treat every customer like family." "Exactly. My grandfather wrote those words when he opened the first store. He believed that business was about more than just selling goods. It was about serving the community." Mr. Parker gestured toward Mr. Peterson. "From what I understand, that's precisely what you did yesterday." "I was just trying to help," Sarah said softly. "According to Mr. Peterson, you did more than help. You showed compassion when it mattered most. You put a person's well-being above a policy." "But I did break company rules," Sarah admitted. Mr. Parker nodded thoughtfully. "Rules exist for good reasons, and generally they should be followed. But rules without compassion become tyranny. My grandfather understood that, which is why the employee handbook, which I'm guessing Mr. Jenkins failed to consult, contains a provision for exceptional customer service circumstances where normal protocols may be set aside." Sarah blinked in surprise. She'd never heard of such a provision. "Furthermore," Mr. Parker continued, "I've asked HR to review your employment record. 3 years without a single absence. Consistently positive customer feedback. Regular commendations from department heads. One warning about an unauthorized discount, which, upon further investigation, was for a student who had just lost her financial aid and needed supplies for her dorm." "She was crying in the store," Sarah recalled. "It was only a 10% discount." "A display of the same compassion," Mr. Parker noted. "Ms. Thompson, based on everything I've learned, I believe your termination was unwarranted and inconsistent with the values of this company." Hope fluttered in Sarah's chest. "Does that mean?" "I'm offering you your job back, with full reinstatement of benefits and no break in service," Mr. Parker stated. "Additionally, I'd like to compensate you for the distress caused by this situation with 2 weeks of paid administrative leave, effective immediately." Sarah's mouth fell open. "I thank you, Mr. Parker." "There's more," he continued. "When you return, it won't be to the same position. I'm creating a new role at each of our stores, Customer Experience Manager. This person will report directly to regional management, bypassing store managers, and will be responsible for ensuring that every Parker's store truly lives up to our promise of treating customers like family." "That sounds like an important position," Sarah said carefully. "It is, and based on Mr. Peterson's account and your employment record, I believe you're the perfect person to pilot this role at your store. It comes with a 30% increase in pay and more regular hours. No more opening shifts unless you want them." Sarah's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. "Mr. Parker, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Peterson encouraged, patting her hand. "The world needs more people like you in positions of authority." "There's one condition," Mr. Parker added. "The first task in your new role will be to conduct a full review of customer service practices at your store, with a focus on how policies are being implemented by management. I want a report directly from you about whether Mr. Jenkins is the right person to be managing that location." The implications were clear. Sarah was being asked to evaluate the very man who had fired her. "Don't worry about retaliation," Mr. Parker said, reading her expression. "As I mentioned, you'll report directly to regional management, not to Jenkins. He'll be informed of this change today." Sarah took a deep breath, thinking about her children, about Mrs. Garcia's kindness, about Mr. Peterson standing in the rain. "I accept. Thank you for this opportunity." "Excellent," Mr. Parker smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Jasmine will help you with the paperwork before you leave. Your administrative leave starts today, so take these 2 weeks to rest and prepare for your new role." As if on cue, Jasmine entered with a folder of documents. "Everything's ready, Mr. Parker." "Perfect timing." Mr. Parker stood, extending his hand to Sarah again. "Welcome to the real Parker's family, Ms. Thompson. I look forward to seeing the positive changes you'll bring to our customer experience." Sarah shook his hand, still somewhat dazed by the rapid reversal of her fortunes. "I won't let you down, sir." "I know you won't." He turned to Mr. Peterson. "And thank you, Mr. Peterson, for bringing this situation to my attention. Parker's is fortunate to have customers like you." The elderly man waved away the thanks as he slowly got to his feet, leaning on his walker. "I'm just glad it all worked out. Sarah here is a special person. Not many would have done what she did." As Jasmine led them out, Mr. Peterson walked beside Sarah. "See, sometimes doing the right thing does pay off in the end." "I never expected anything like this," Sarah admitted quietly. "The best things in life are unexpected," Mr. Peterson replied. "Like finding an angel with an umbrella when you're caught in the rain." In the elevator, as they descended from the 12th floor, Sarah felt as if she were floating. Just 24 hours ago, she had been employed, then unemployed, desperate and fearful for her future. Now she was not only employed again but promoted, with better pay and better hours. She couldn't wait to tell Mrs. Garcia and the children. As they reached the lobby, Mr. Peterson touched her arm. "I almost forgot. I brought this back." He handed her the navy blue umbrella with the Parker's logo. It served its purpose wonderfully. My grandson was quite impressed that his old grandpa arrived completely dry despite the storm. Sarah smiled, taking the umbrella. Once a symbol of her downfall, it now represented her unexpected rise. "Keep it," she said, pressing it back into his hands. "Consider it a gift from the new customer experience manager." Mr. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "I think I will. It'll remind me that even on the rainiest days, there are still good people in the world." They parted ways at the building entrance, Sarah watching as the elderly man made his way carefully to the bus stop. The sky above was clear blue, without a cloud in sight. Sarah opened her phone and called Mrs. Garcia. "How did it go?" the older woman asked immediately. "You won't believe it," Sarah replied, her voice buoyant with joy. "But maybe I should tell you in person. Are you free for lunch? I'm buying." "Of course, mihija. The children will be so happy when they hear you're in better spirits." "They'll be even happier when they hear I got promoted," Sarah said, still scarcely believing it herself. "Promoted, but I thought," Mrs. Garcia's voice filled with surprise. "I'll tell you everything when I see you," Sarah promised. "It's too incredible to explain over the phone." Sarah walked toward the bus stop, her steps lighter than they had been in years. The sunshine warmed her face as she tilted her head back, soaking in the moment. Yesterday's storm clouds had completely vanished, leaving behind a sky so brilliantly blue it almost hurt to look at it. On the bus ride home, Sarah couldn't stop smiling. Other passengers probably thought she was crazy, grinning to herself like that, but she didn't care. She pulled out her phone and looked at the official letter Jasmine had given her, confirming her new position and salary. The 30% increase would change everything. They could move to a better apartment, start a college fund for the kids, maybe even take a real vacation someday. More importantly, the regular hours meant she could be home for dinner with Emma and Liam every night, help with homework, attend school events without begging for schedule adjustments. She might even have time to finally finish her own associate's degree, taking night classes while Mrs. Garcia watched the kids. When Sarah arrived at Mrs. Garcia's apartment, the older woman was waiting with a pot of coffee and freshly baked cookies. "Now," Mrs. Garcia said, setting a steaming mug in front of Sarah, "tell me everything." Sarah recounted the meeting with Mr. Parker and Mr. Peterson, still marveling at how events had unfolded. "Dios mío," Mrs. Garcia exclaimed when she finished. "It's like a miracle." "It feels that way," Sarah agreed. "I still can't believe it." "I can," Mrs. Garcia said firmly. "Good people deserve good things. The universe has balance." She reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "So what will you do with your 2 weeks off?" Sarah hadn't even thought about that yet. "I don't know, catch up on sleep, deep clean the apartment, help the kids with school projects. And perhaps look for a better place to live," Mrs. Garcia suggested gently, "with your new salary." "But then we wouldn't be neighbors anymore," Sarah protested. Mrs. Garcia smiled. "Mihija, I love having you and the children nearby, but this building isn't the best place for growing children. The school district 2 miles north has better programs, especially for gifted children like your Liam." It was true. Sarah had researched those schools when they first moved to the area but knew they couldn't afford to live in that district on her Parker's salary. Now, though, "I'll think about it," she promised. "But no matter where we live, you'll always be family to us, Mrs. Garcia." "Of course," the older woman nodded. "Now, shall we walk to the school together to surprise the children with your good news?" The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah used her unexpected break to research apartments in the better school district, finding a 3-bedroom unit in a well-maintained complex with a playground and community pool. It would stretch their budget even with her new salary, but the schools made it worth the sacrifice. She scheduled the move for the week before she would start her new position. The children were initially sad about leaving Mrs. Garcia, but became excited when they toured their new home and saw the pool. "Can we swim every day?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Not every day, but often," Sarah promised, "and Mrs. Garcia will visit us regularly." On her last day of administrative leave, Sarah received an email from Jasmine Williams with her official start date, new employee handbook, and most surprisingly, a personal note from Alexander Parker. "Ms. Thompson **. I look forward to your contributions as our first customer experience manager. This position represents a significant shift in how Parker's approaches customer service, placing it at the forefront of our business model rather than as an afterthought. I have every confidence that you will excel in this role. I've informed Regional Director Patel that you'll be reporting directly to her. She's eager to meet you and will provide any support you need, especially regarding your assessment of current management practices at your store. Remember that your voice matters. If you encounter resistance, don't hesitate to speak up. Parker's can only improve when brave employees like yourself hold us accountable to our values. Best regards, Alexander Parker, CEO, Parker's Department Stores." Sarah read the email twice, feeling both honored and intimidated. Mr. Parker was placing enormous trust in her, trust she was determined to prove well-founded. The following Monday, Sarah dropped Emma and Liam at their new school. Both children were nervous but excited, wearing new outfits purchased from Parker's with Sarah's employee discount. "You're going to have a great day," she assured them, hugging each child tightly. "And I'll be here to pick you up right after school ends. No more after-school care." "Promise?" Liam asked, adjusting his backpack. "Promise," Sarah confirmed. "That's the best part of my new job, more time with you too." After watching them walk into the school building, Sarah drove to Parker's in the used car she'd purchased with part of her sign-on bonus. No more long bus rides in bad weather. She parked in the employee section, nodding with amusement that her new position entitled her to a spot closer to the entrance. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed down her new blazer and walked through the employee entrance. The break room fell silent as she entered. Then May rushed forward, enveloping her in a hug. "You're back, and with a promotion. I couldn't believe it when they told us." Other employees gathered around, offering congratulations and welcome-back wishes. Sarah noticed some nervous glances as well. Her new role of evaluating customer service practices clearly made some uncomfortable. "Thank you all," she said warmly. "I'm excited to work with everyone to make this store the best it can be for our customers." A throat cleared from the doorway. Richard Jenkins stood there, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Thompson, welcome back. Regional Director Patel is waiting in the conference room to meet with us." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," Sarah replied professionally. "I'll head there now." As she followed Jenkins down the hallway, Sarah observed his stiff posture and clenched jaw. News of her promotion had clearly not been well received. The conference room door was open, revealing a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and a tailored suit. She rose as Sarah entered. "Ms. Thompson, I presume. I'm Nalini Patel, Regional Director for the Northeast." Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Please sit down." The meeting lasted over an hour, with Director Patel outlining expectations for Sarah's new role and the approach to evaluating current customer service practices. Jenkins contributed little, speaking only when directly addressed. "I believe Mr. Jenkins has concerns about the organizational structure," Director Patel said finally, addressing the tension in the room. "Richard, would you like to share your thoughts?" Jenkins straightened in his chair. "With all due respect, Director Patel, I find it irregular that a floor employee with no management experience has been elevated to a position that appears to have authority over store managers." "Former floor employee," Director Patel corrected gently. "And Ms. Thompson's role isn't to supervise you, but to ensure our customer experience aligns with corporate values. She reports to me, not to interfere with your management." "I understand," Jenkins replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I simply wonder if someone with more experience might be better suited." "Mr. Parker personally selected Ms. Thompson for this position," Director Patel said with finality. "His judgment on this matter is not open for discussion." She turned to Sarah. "Do you have any questions before we conclude?" "Just one," Sarah said. "How will success be measured in this role? What specific outcomes are expected?" Director Patel smiled approvingly. "Excellent question. We'll be tracking customer satisfaction scores, return customer rates, and direct feedback through our loyalty program. Additionally, we'd like to see improvement in employee satisfaction and reduced turnover, as happier employees create better customer experiences." The meeting ended with Director Patel scheduling weekly check-ins with Sarah and reminding Jenkins that his full cooperation was expected. As they left the conference room, Jenkins stopped Sarah in the hallway. "I hope there are no hard feelings about what happened," he said stiffly. Sarah met his gaze directly. "I'm focused on moving forward, Mr. Jenkins. I hope we can work together professionally for the benefit of Parker's customers." Jenkins nodded curtly before walking away. Sarah's first week in her new role was challenging but rewarding. She spent time in each department, observing customer interactions, reviewing complaint logs, and speaking with employees about their experiences. By Friday, she had compiled enough information for her initial report to Director Patel. While Jenkins ran a tight ship operationally, employee morale was concerning, and several patterns in customer complaints suggested an overemphasis on rigid policy enforcement at the expense of customer satisfaction. "These findings align with what Mr. Parker suspected," Director Patel said during their call. "What do you recommend?" Sarah had thought carefully about this. "I'd like to implement a tiered response system for policy exceptions, giving frontline employees more discretion for minor issues while requiring manager approval only for significant deviations. I also recommend customer service refresher training for all staff, with an emphasis on empathy and problem solving." "And Jenkins?" "He's knowledgeable and efficient," Sarah said diplomatically, "but his management style creates fear rather than inspiration. I believe he would benefit from coaching on employee engagement and the value of flexibility in customer service." Director Patel made notes. "Very balanced assessment. I'll arrange for the training and coaching. In the meantime, proceed with your tiered response system proposal. I'd like to see it implemented within 2 weeks." Sarah ended the call feeling both accomplished and anxious. Jenkins wouldn't welcome these changes, but they were necessary for improving the store's customer experience. As predicted, Jenkins was resistant when Sarah presented the new system during Monday's staff meeting. "This undermines management authority," he argued. "If employees can make their own decisions about policy exceptions, what's to prevent abuse?" "The system has safeguards," Sarah explained patiently. "Employees can only make exceptions up to a certain dollar value. All exceptions must be logged, and patterns of unusual activity will trigger review. It's not about undermining authority. It's about empowering our team to solve customer problems efficiently." "Director Patel has approved this?" Jenkins asked skeptically. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "The tiered response system goes into effect next Monday. We'll be conducting training sessions throughout this week." Jenkins fell silent, clearly unhappy, but unwilling to openly contradict a directive from regional management. The training sessions went surprisingly well. Many employees expressed relief at having clearer guidelines for when they could bend rules to help customers. Even Jenkins grudgingly acknowledged that the documentation process was thorough. Sarah picked up Emma and Liam from school each afternoon, marveling at the luxury of being present for this part of their day. They would walk home together, the children chattering about their new friends and teachers, stopping sometimes at the playground near their apartment. "Mom, are you happy at your new job?" Liam asked one afternoon as they sat on a bench watching Emma play on the swings. Sarah considered the question. "Yes, I am. It's challenging, but in a good way. I feel like I'm making a difference." "Mr. Peterson came to our class today," Liam said suddenly, "for career day. He used to be a judge before he retired." Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Mr. Peterson was a judge? I had no idea." Liam nodded. "He told us about making hard decisions and always trying to be fair. And then he told us a story about how his grandson got sick and a nice lady at a store helped him, even though she wasn't supposed to." He looked up at Sarah. "Was that you, Mom?" "Yes," Sarah admitted, touched that Mr. Peterson had shared the story. "That's how I got my new job." "He said you were a hero," Liam said proudly. "He said heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just carry umbrellas." Sarah laughed, blinking back unexpected tears. "Mr. Peterson gives me too much credit. I just did what seemed right at the time." "That's what makes someone a hero," Liam said with the simple wisdom of an 8-year-old. doing the right thing even when it's hard. On Monday morning, the tiered response system officially launched. Sarah arrived early to answer any questions and provide support. To her relief, the day progressed smoothly, with several employees successfully navigating minor policy exceptions to resolve customer issues. In the afternoon, she was called to the customer service desk to assist with a more complicated situation. A woman was trying to return an open set of sheets without a receipt, claiming they had torn after one washing. Store policy prohibited returns of open bedding without proof of purchase. "I understand your frustration, ma'am," the customer service associate was saying. "Let me call our customer experience manager to see if we can find a solution." Sarah approached with a smile. "Hello, I'm Sarah Thompson. How can I help today?" The customer explained her situation again, growing increasingly agitated. "These sheets cost $89.99. They shouldn't fall apart after one wash." "I completely agree," Sarah said calmly. "May I ask if you're a member of our rewards program? We might be able to look up your purchase that way." "No, it was a gift from my daughter," the woman replied. Under the old system, this would have been an automatic rejection. Under the new tiered response guidelines, however, the situation fell into a gray area where customer satisfaction might outweigh strict policy adherence. "Here's what I can do," Sarah offered. "While we can't offer a refund without proof of purchase, I can offer you a store credit for half the value of the sheets. Additionally, I'd like to send these sheets to our quality control department to investigate the defect. If they confirm the product is faulty, we'll issue a full credit and remove the item from our shelves." The woman's anger deflated. "That seems reasonable. Thank you for taking this seriously." After the customer left with her store credit, the associate at the desk looked at Sarah admiringly. "That was so much better than our old approach. She would have left angry, telling everyone about her bad experience. Now she'll probably shop here again." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "And if there is a quality issue with those sheets, we've potentially prevented more unhappy customers." A voice spoke from behind her. "Interesting solution." Sarah turned to find Jenkins observing the interaction. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. It seemed like the best balance between policy and customer satisfaction." "Perhaps," he said noncommittally. "Director Patel wants to see both of us in her office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. "Did she say why?" Sarah asked, concerned. "No, just that it's important." Jenkins walked away, leaving Sarah wondering what the meeting would entail. That evening, as Sarah helped Emma with her science project, the crystal growing experiment they'd planned months ago, she tried not to worry about tomorrow's meeting. The children were settled and happy in their new school. Their new apartment was starting to feel like home, and her job, despite its challenges, fulfilled her in ways her previous position never had. Whatever Director Patel wanted, Sarah would face it with the same determination that had brought her this far. The next morning, Sarah dropped the children at school and drove to the regional office, arriving precisely at 9. Jenkins was already seated in Director Patel's office, looking uncomfortable. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," Director Patel greeted her. "Please sit down. We have something important to discuss." Sarah took the offered seat, nodding the serious expression on the director's face. "Mr. Parker has been reviewing the monthly reports from all stores," Director Patel began. "Yesterday, he called me about yours specifically." Sarah's stomach tightened. Had she done something wrong? Was the tiered response system not working as well as she thought? "Your store's customer satisfaction ratings have increased by 12% in just the 3 weeks since you implemented your new system," Director Patel continued. "That's unprecedented in our company's history." "Oh," Sarah breathed, relief washing over her. "That's wonderful news." "It is," Director Patel agreed. "Mr. Parker is impressed. So impressed, in fact, that he wants to roll out your tiered response system to all Parker's locations nationwide." Jenkins shifted in his seat, his expression unreadable. Additionally, Director Patel went on, Mr. Parker would like to create a customer experience manager position in each region, reporting directly to me, to oversee implementation across multiple stores. She smiled at Sarah. He'd like you to take that position, Ms. Thompson. Sarah blinked in surprise. Another promotion so soon. Your results speak for themselves, Director Patel said. This would mean a significant salary increase, of course, though some travel between stores would be required. Sarah thought of her promise to Liam and Emma to be there after school every day. How much travel? 2 days per week at most, Director Patel assured her. We can work with your schedule to ensure you maintain work-life balance. Sarah nodded slowly. I'm honored by the offer. May I have a day to consider it? Of course. Director Patel turned to Jenkins. Now, Mr. Jenkins, we need to discuss your role in this transition. Jenkins straightened. Am I being replaced? Not exactly, Director Patel said carefully. Mr. Parker feels your operational skills are valuable, but that your management approach needs adjustment. He's offering you a choice: accept coaching and adapt to our new customer-centric model, or transfer to our operations division at headquarters, overseeing inventory management systems. Jenkins was silent for a long moment. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he sighed. Ms. Thompson's system is working. I can see that in the numbers, even if I initially disagreed with the approach. I've been with Parker's for 17 years, and I'm not too proud to learn new methods if they're proving effective. So you'll accept the coaching? Director Patel asked. Jenkins nodded. Yes, and I owe Ms. Thompson an apology. He turned to Sarah. I misjudged you and the situation with Mr. Peterson. I was so focused on rules that I missed the larger picture. I'm sorry. Stunned by this unexpected admission, Sarah managed a smile. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I appreciate that. After the meeting, as Sarah walked to her car, Jenkins called after her. Ms. Thompson, Sarah, wait a moment. She turned curious. I meant what I said in there, he told her. I was wrong about you. The truth is, I've been managing the same way for so long, I stopped questioning whether it was the best approach. Change is difficult, Sarah acknowledged, but sometimes necessary. Will you accept the regional position? He asked. Sarah sighed. I don't know yet. It's a wonderful opportunity, but I made promises to my children about being present for them. I need to figure out if I can do both well. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I think you could. You have a rare ability to see the whole picture, both the business needs and the human element. Parker's needs more of that. Thank you, Sarah said, genuinely touched by his words. That means a lot. As she drove to pick up her children from school, Sarah weighed her options. The regional position would provide even greater financial security for her family. The travel was manageable. Director Patel seemed supportive of accommodating her family needs. But was it the right move for Emma and Liam? They had already experienced so much change in recent weeks. A new apartment, a new school. Would another shift in their mother's routine be too much? The children bounded out of the school building, faces lighting up when they spotted her waiting. Mom, I got an A on my math test, Liam announced, waving a paper proudly. And my teacher picked my drawing for the art wall, Emma added, not to be outdone. Sarah hugged them both. That's fantastic. How about we celebrate with ice cream? At the ice cream shop near their apartment, Sarah watched her children laughing together, chocolate smeared on Emma's cheek, sprinkles dotting Liam's shirt. These moments were precious, irreplaceable. I need to talk to you both about something important, she said once they'd finished their treats. I've been offered another new job. Another one? Emma's eyes widened. Did you get fired again? No, sweetie, Sarah laughed. It's a promotion. My boss thinks I'm doing a good job and wants me to do similar work for more stores. So we'd have to move again, Liam asked anxiously. No, we'd stay right here in our new apartment. But I might have to travel to other cities sometimes, maybe 1 or 2 days each week. The children exchanged glances. Who would pick us up from school? Emma asked. And help with homework, Liam added. We'd find a solution, Sarah assured them. Maybe an after-school program on those days, or perhaps Mrs. Garcia could help occasionally, and I'd always be home for dinner, even on travel days. Would you make more money? Liam asked practically. Sarah nodded. Yes, and that would mean more security for our family, maybe even saving for college for both of you. I think you should take it, Mom, Liam said after a moment's consideration. You helped that old man even though it got you in trouble. Now you can help even more people. Emma nodded agreement. And we're big kids now. We can handle it if you're gone sometimes. Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. When had her children become so mature, so thoughtful? I'll think about it, she promised. Your opinions matter to me. That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah sat on her small balcony, looking at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Garcia. Any decision on the new job? The children told me about it when they called me after dinner. Sarah smiled. Despite the distance, Mrs. Garcia remained an important part of their lives. She typed back, still thinking, the opportunity is amazing, but I worry about the kids. Mrs. Garcia's response came quickly. Those children are strong and adaptable because their mother taught them to be. They will thrive no matter what you decide. Choose what brings you joy. Joy, such a simple word for such a profound concept. What did bring her joy? Helping Mr. Peterson had brought joy, even before it led to career advancement. Seeing the relief on that customer's face yesterday when Sarah found a solution to her sheet problem had brought joy. Knowing that her system was improving experiences for both customers and employees brought joy. Sarah realized that her new role wasn't just about a better salary or career advancement. It was about expanding her ability to create positive change, to ensure that other employees could show the same compassion she had shown Mr. Peterson without fear of punishment. Her decision made, Sarah sent a quick email to Director Patel, accepting the regional position with the condition that her travel schedule accommodate her children's needs. Then she called Mrs. Garcia to share the news. I knew you would take it, Mrs. Garcia said warmly. You were born to help people, mihija. I couldn't have done any of this without your support, Sarah told her. You've been our guardian angel. Nonsense, Mrs. Garcia dismissed the praise. You did the hard work. I just provided a little encouragement and some chicken soup. Sarah laughed. Well, we'll need your famous soup next Sunday to celebrate. Will you come for dinner? I wouldn't miss it, Mrs. Garcia promised. 6 months later, Sarah stood at a podium in Parker's corporate headquarters, addressing the annual management conference. Behind her, a large screen displayed the title of her presentation, The Human Element, Building Customer Loyalty Through Compassionate Service. In the audience, she could see Director Patel nodding encouragingly, Jenkins looking attentive beside his store's team, and in the front row, Alexander Parker himself, who had personally requested that Sarah deliver the keynote address. When I started at Parker's 3.5 years ago, Sarah began, I was just trying to provide for my family. I never imagined I'd be standing here today as Regional Customer Experience Director. But life has a way of surprising us, sometimes through umbrellas. A chuckle rippled through the audience. The story of Sarah's firing and rehiring had become something of a company legend. The tiered response system we've implemented across all stores has increased customer satisfaction by 23% region-wide, Sarah continued. Return customer visits are up 17%. Employee retention has improved by 12%. These numbers tell an important story. When we trust our employees to make compassionate decisions, everyone benefits, customers, employees, and yes, the company's bottom line. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of Mr. Peterson at his grandson's college graduation. This gentleman taught me an important lesson. Behind every policy there are people. Behind every transaction there are human beings with needs, hopes, and sometimes urgent situations. Our job isn't just to sell products, it's to serve people. From the back of the room, a familiar voice called out, "Here, here." Sarah smiled, recognizing Mr. Peterson himself, who had become a regular consultant for Parker's senior customer advisory board. The Parkers' promise to treat every customer like family isn't just a slogan, Sarah continued. It's a commitment that should guide every decision we make, from corporate headquarters to the sales floor. Sometimes that means bending a rule to help someone in need. Sometimes it means going above and beyond what's expected. Always, it means seeing the human being behind the customer label. As she concluded her presentation to enthusiastic applause, Sarah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her journey from being fired for helping an elderly man to helping reshape her company's approach to customer service had been unexpected but deeply rewarding. Alexander Parker approached her after the presentation, shaking her hand warmly. "Excellent work, Ms. Thompson. Your insights are transforming Parkers for the better." "Thank you, Mr. Parker," Sarah replied, "for everything." "No," he smiled. "Thank you for reminding us what my grandfather knew, that business is ultimately about people helping people." Later that evening, Sarah drove home, eager to see Emma and Liam. Her travel schedule had indeed been manageable, and the children had adjusted well to the 2 days each week when they attended the after-school program. Mrs. Garcia visited regularly for Sunday dinners, and life had fallen into a pleasant, if busy, rhythm. As she pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building, her phone chimed with a text message from Liam. "Hurry home, we have a surprise." Sarah smiled, wondering what her creative children had planned this time. Last week, they had prepared dinner themselves, with some supervision from the neighbor across the hall. The week before, they had created a spa night with homemade face masks and nail polish. When she opened the apartment door, she was greeted by a chorus of surprise. Emma, Liam, Mrs. Garcia, and unexpectedly, Mr. Peterson all stood in her living room, surrounding a cake that read, "Congratulations on your keynote." "How did you know about that?" Sarah asked, amazed. "Mr. Peterson called us," Emma explained. "He said you were amazing." "The best speaker of the day," Mr. Peterson confirmed. "I told Alexander Parker the same thing." Mrs. Garcia bustled forward to hug her. "We are all so proud of you, Mihija." Sarah looked around at these people who had become her extended family. The elderly neighbor who had supported her through her darkest days, the gentleman whose need for an umbrella had inadvertently changed her life, and her beautiful children whose resilience and love sustained her daily. "I don't know what to say," Sarah admitted, feeling tears of joy well up. "Say you'll cut the cake," Liam suggested practically. "We're starving." Everyone laughed, and Sarah obliged, cutting slices for each person. As they ate cake and shared stories, Sarah reflected on the remarkable journey of the past 6 months. One small act of kindness, giving an umbrella to an elderly man in the rain, had created ripples that transformed not only her life, but the experiences of countless Parker's customers and employees. Every day, somewhere in the company's 57 stores, an employee was now empowered to show compassion rather than rigid adherence to rules. Later, after Mr. Peterson had gone home and Mrs. Garcia had retired to the guest room for the night, Sarah tucked her children into bed. "Mom," Emma asked sleepily, "are you happy now?" Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, very happy." "Because you help people," Liam murmured from his bed. "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "Because I help people, and because I have you too and Mrs. Garcia and friends like Mr. Peterson. I'm the luckiest mom in the world." As her children drifted off to sleep, Sarah stood in the doorway of their room, watching their peaceful faces in the soft glow of the nightlight. She thought about the day's presentation, about the journey that had brought her here, about the future stretching bright before them. In the quiet of the evening, she remembered that rainy day 6 months ago when everything had seemed to fall apart. The storm that had threatened to drown her hopes had instead carried her to unexpected shores, to a life richer and more fulfilling than she could have imagined. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the hardest moments led to the greatest blessings. Sometimes getting caught in the rain without an umbrella, or giving one away when you shouldn't, opened doors you never knew existed. Sometimes losing your job meant finding your purpose. As she gently closed her children's bedroom door, Sarah whispered a silent thank you to the universe for umbrellas, for second chances, and for the power of simple kindness to change lives in ways no one could predict. If you enjoyed this story about how one act of kindness changed everything for Sarah and her family, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.